So Fad Friday, I want to go over one of my favorite studies. This study deals with selective hypertrophy. And it wasn't the goal, it's about a velocity loss. But at the end of the day, this is where we are. So I want to just go ahead and look at this study. The effect of velocity loss during resistance training on athlete performance, strength gains, and muscle adaptations. So we see, Fernando Pereira Blanco is the lead author on here. He's done a lot in this area. Does a fantastic job. So the study design, let's just go through it. They had two groups, and they wanted to look at 20% velocity loss versus 40% velocity loss. Now, I better slow down and stop myself because velocity loss for me is second nature, but for y'all, this might be the first time you ever heard of it. So what velocity loss is it is basically a way to mitigate fatigue. Okay, so you go and you perform repetitions as fast as you can, and fatigue is going to kick in, and that's what's because obviously we have energy systems, metabolic byproducts, neural fatigue, and all these other things are going to kick in, and that's going to make your muscular recruitment happen slower. And whenever we see a 20% reduction or whatever percent reduction in velocity, that's whenever the set is terminated. So as we see here, they just use a 20 and a 40% velocity loss. The percentages of 1RM were the same. It's just one group essentially did more repetitions per set than the other. Okay, that's it. And where did that come from? That's no good. I don't know. We'll figure out at some point. Now, so what is velocity loss? Again, it's performance of repetitions until fatigue slows down the muscle recruitment and thus the movement velocity. So the reps per set are by decrement and corresponding velocity as opposed to 3 sets of 8 at this weight. Okay, we're going to see what you have that day and how your fatigue is. So if you have a lower velocity loss, you're going to have a greater, you're going to have less fatigue accrued. Greater velocity loss, of course, is going to be more repetitions. You're going to have more volume, more fatigue accrued. Okay, so let's just stop and think before we go through this study. What do we think is going to happen for strength between these two groups? The group that did more repetitions or the group that did less repetitions is going to see more increase in strength? Think less?
You would think less, but maybe.
Oh, you would think less? Well, me and where I'm coming from, like the stuff on the APRE, the groups that did the higher volume saw bigger improvements in strength. So that's what I had seen before and what I had experienced in some of my own research before. What do we think happens to speed and jumping ability? Do we think the 20% loss group, you know what, I got an idea. We're going to go back to the old school. Close your eyes, raise your hand, so then you don't have to worry, is Dr. Mann going to, do my other classmates think I'm dumb? Speed and jumping ability. Do we think the 40%, the higher volume group would do better or the lower volume group would do better? Eyes closed. Who thinks the higher volume group saw a better improvement in speed and power? Okay, great. Who thinks so? The lower volume group saw it. Okay, fantastic. What do we think happens for overall muscle mass? Okay, we're going to the same two options. Okay, eyes closed. Who thinks the 40% velocity loss had a higher muscle mass gain? Who thinks the 20% loss had a higher muscle gain? Okay, so we've all made our choices. We've locked them in as to what's going to happen. Let's check and see. Now, what I really like about this study is it's one of the few to do multiple types of fiber typing, as well as looking at the cross-sectional areas and how things happen as a macro and a micro level. So yeah, they did the fiber typing here. They did it as the, oh my gosh, what is B? Is that electrophoresis? Represent cosmetic magnetism, blah, 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 and that doesn't say which methodology it was. I believe this was histochemical staining and this is electrophoresis. Okay, so we've got both two of the three main methodologies, with single fiber DNA extraction being the other one. Okay, so we got a couple of them that are up here. Now, here, what we're seeing is the total number of repetitions. And guess what? The 40 group did more reps than the 20 group. And whenever we see the study at the end, holy cow, yet again, they did roughly twice the repetitions. It's like, how come it isn't exactly twice? Dude, we're human. So some people might slow down at rates more than others. Now let's get into it. The changes in selected neuromuscular performance variables from pre to post for each group. So we look at the velocity loss 40 group. You want to start at the top and work our way down here? So whenever we're looking at, I don't remember if this is squat or leg press, what RM. I should have looked, yes, it's squat. We went from 104 to 118. Did they go up? Yep, they went up by 14 kilos. Hey, dude, in 6 weeks, up 14 kilos on the squat, I mean, that 30 pounds, that's pretty good, right? So let's look here. Velocity loss 20, half of the volume. They went up 19 kilos as opposed to 14. Now, we could see that, yeah, there's a significantly better effect here. But, you know, it's not showing it's significantly better, but it doesn't give us an effect size. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, this is just looking at what was the average velocity. They're not going to vary that much, but we can see that we're sitting about 106 versus 101. All that is averaging up all the repetition speeds throughout the whole cycle. It's kind of I'm not going to say meaningless, but yeah, I kind of think they put stuff like this on a chart just to have something else to talk about as opposed to it actually being anything relevant. Now we look down here to the counter movement jump. Velocity loss 40. So go on to almost to failure. They went up 1.5 centimeters in 6 weeks. 1.5 centimeters, that's in Northern Ireland. Are you guys metric or were you using inches? Okay, so you can't help me out there. 1.5 centimeters, well, 2.54 centimeters is an inch. So what's that, like just over half? Let's call it 2/3 of an inch. 6 weeks, not bad. Not bad. Do I want that? I would like more. But as long as we're seeing an increase, I'm okay with my athletes. We look at velocity loss 20, 3.7 centimeters. Double the improvement. Okay? The sprinting, we see that we have a 0.03 second getting slower. Okay? But what do we notice about the statistical significance there? It's not significantly different. Okay, so while it's slower, we can't say that it's this major thing because it didn't reach statistical significance. Now, we could say they trended slower. That's true. That's true. And they trended faster, but again, not significantly different. Okay? I think that we need to harp on that mostly because I got mad yesterday and I got mad today. I've been mad this week a lot, apparently. But one of my former students took a paper that myself and Jonathan Weekly and I can't remember what Matt's last name is. I met him at NSCA. But we published a paper on diminishing gains as you go through a career in college football. And he was like, see, this is what happened. They got weaker and they got faster. Well, Ramsey, I'll edit that part out. That's not what it said. There was no statistical difference. There was no difference in effect size. They didn't get weaker and faster. They didn't. There was no change, right? So we got to be careful whenever we're talking about these things. Yeah, it trended a certain way, but that didn't mean it was different. Okay? So, yes?
What do you need the p-value to be to say it's legitimate, or how do you determine significant?
Great question. So that is set by the alpha. Most of the time, people's alpha is at 0.0, is 95%, so you have a 0.05 is what you want to have there. And if it's below 0.05, then it's considered statistically significant. But what all that means is that these 2 points are different from each other. There's a 95% chance that these two are not the same. That's all it says. It doesn't say how different they are or anything else. It doesn't even say if it's relevant, just that it's different. Okay? And these numbers are not. Now, let's look here. This is the changes in the muscle volume. And we see here that the velocity loss 40 has a 7.7% increase in the quads versus 4.6 in the velocity loss 20 group. We could see that the muscle volume was about, of the rectus femoris, actually had a reduction. Why? No idea. No idea. Okay? And that goes back to the fact that who are we dealing with whenever we're dealing with research with human subjects? Humans. And we have tremendous amounts of variability that exists with each person. I don't know if it's one person dropped everything down, what happened. No idea. But the rectus femoris got smaller, but the other quads got bigger. Hey, comes out in the wash, right? That the quads are overall bigger. And then we look here at vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and intermedius, and we can see the changes there. So they're much greater in the other three muscles than they were in the rectus femoris. Okay, 11.4, 9.0 versus dropping down minus 3.6. So that's how we get the 7.7 average. That's why its average is dropped from everything else. Now we come here. And I want to make sure that we understand the difference between percentage of fiber type and fiber area. Okay? For instance, and this is what it all comes back to. What fiber is bigger? Type 2 or type 1? Type 2. Fantastic. So if I have 50% type 2 fibers and I have 50% type 1 fibers, I have got 50-50 on my count, okay, on my fiber type. Right? Now, if the type 2s are bigger than the type 1s, what's my area going to be on that 50-50 split? Is it going to be 50-50? Why not? The type 2 fibers are bigger, so they should be taking up more area. So they might be like 65% of the area, while only 50% of the number. Okay? Now that's the reason for going through as many as he did. Now, if we look at just the number, the muscle, do I want to do that? Let's just look at the cross-sectional area of it. We can look at the total overall cross-sectional area, went up about 503 in whatever unit that is, micrometers, I think, nanometers. This one we went up 417. So clearly we have greater hypertrophy with the velocity loss 40. Should be no surprise to anybody because we know that time under tension is the primary aspect that is leading to hypertrophy. So of course, if you do more volume, you're going to get more muscle out of it. But here's where I want to go, and let's look down at. Do I want to look at percentage of fiber area or fiber type? Well, let's look both of them independently. Whenever we do this training, the velocity loss 40, this is usually a repetition or two from failure. We see our type 1 fiber goes from 44.3 to 47.5%. So we're having, and we see that our type 2A fibers go from 36.5 to 36.4. They stayed the same. 2AX went from 11.2 to 12. It went up a little bit. And then we see that our type 2 fibers go from 7.8 to 3.8. What's going on here? Well, we remember our fiber type is a continuum. So what we have done is we're seeing a shift away from the explosive fibers towards the type 1 in 6 weeks of training. These people keep saying you don't change fiber types from training. Well, I'm pretty sure here's the data. So let's look at that. Hey, now we come over to the 20%. Did I go on the top? Which one did I do first? Did I do this one? So we see that we have a 2%, 45.9 to 43.7, 2.2% decrease in type 1 fibers. And we see that we have a 5% increase in the 2A. And our 2AX intermediary drops down by 3, and we drop down by 2.2. So what we're seeing is a transition away from the intermediaries in type 1 to 2A. Okay? Now, if we look down here, we see the same thing, right? It's the percentage area. It just is a little less drastic, I guess is what we could say. Why would it be a little bit less drastic? Because your type 1 fiber is still hypertrophy as well. Okay? But again, what we still see is that we're going towards 2A fibers at a 20% velocity loss. We're going towards type 1 fibers in a 40% velocity loss. So my takeaways. Somebody's going to ask which one is better. There isn't one that's better. These are situationally dependent. Okay? Let's say I have let's say that Christian can't, we go in a time machine. We can time warp back into the mid-2000s when Christian is 340 and winning the silver and 7 world championships, on that run. Okay? At 340 pounds, at 6'5", how much muscle does he need to add? Not much. And if we add slow twitch fibers, what's going to happen to his timing? It's probably going to be off, regardless. Is it faster or slower? Don't know. Can't make that conjecture. I ain't that bright. But I know that it would be off. Those type 1 fibers contract and relax slower. So he's probably not going to have that snap on the ball that he had at the end that he has. Okay? If he's going to add anything, Christian needs just the type 2A and 2X fibers as opposed to anything else. Now, in that same time warp, about a year prior to that, we had this kid that started out as a walk-on, 6'7", 240-pound offensive lineman. 6'7", 240. That's beanpole, baby. That's beanpole. So for him, what does he need to be a better offensive lineman? He just needs mass. He needs to increase his inertia and his momentum. And the best way to do that is to favor the mass into the equation. So with him, we spent more time doing a lot of volume to add on that mass. And I'll be danged if it didn't end up working, graduating about 320 and spends a few years in the NFL. Right? So it depends on what you need. If you need mass and strength or more volume, a greater loss. If you need strength, speed, or power, do the lower. There's no right or wrong. It is only contextual. So for those watching on social media like this, come join us in Aggie Land. We got our master's program, bachelor's program, all that good stuff. Here's the QR code. I'm sure that application is going to be live soon. And for us, I'm going to stop this and go on and restart it so that it's a separate clip. I don't have to edit that much.